Welcome to the Heroic Minds podcast, where we uncover the heroic stories of individuals battling through adversity and rising to the top of professional sport, business, and life, uncovering the characteristics, the secrets, the tactics to become the hero of your own story, because it is adversity that maximizes human potential. Welcome back to the Heroic Minds podcast. On today's episode, we have Gerry Dee, one of the best comedians of our time, known for his hit show, Mr. D, his stand-up comedy, Gerry Dee Sports Reporter, and his various roles in mainstream movies. Gerry's journey to comedy is exactly what I wanted him on the show for. He still remembers the arguments his parents had when he was a kid over whether they had enough money for food and gas that week. Now, moving forward, while doing his second degree, Gerry had 4 jobs, one of them being comedy, which grew into what it is today. But the interesting thing is, for Gerry, it was never really about chasing the money. It was about trying to do something and not do it just to do it, just to be successful, but to be the best in the world at it. And that's what he takes with him in every challenge that he takes on. His career really took flight in 2002 when he became the first Canadian to win the San Francisco International Comedy Competition, which has also been won by people such as Ellen DeGeneres, Louis C.K., Dane Cook, and more. In this episode, we bounce all over the place. We talk sports right out of the gates, a little bit of concussion talk. We talk society. We talk failure, goal setting. We even get into some comedy. We talk about some issues with the school system and lots more. But this was a really motivating episode for me because I keep hearing Gerry's voice in my head tell me that if you're going to do this, whatever it is, whatever task I'm taking on, if you're going to do this, try to be the best in the world at it. And it's not even about whether you do it or not. And Gerry makes that clear. It's not about whether you become the best in the world or not, but it's the gratification of trying, of putting yourself out there to try and be the best in the world at it. Before we get going today, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a true local meal day. So I'm going to be having some true local meat in all 3 of my meals today. Remember to check out truelocal.ca to find high quality meat individually packaged at your doorstep. You go on their website, you order whatever meat you want, you pick the shipping date, and you can cancel whenever if it's not for you. But I'm guessing it's going to be for you. So locally sourced, high quality meats shipped to your doorstep. And you can use the discount code HeroicMinds25, all capital letters, to get $25 off a regular size box and $10 off an individual size box. truelocal.ca. We start things off with a really important conversation about concussion that I really enjoyed because it's these types of conversations that are going to make this whole concussion issue in all sports better for everyone. More understanding, more honesty, the opinions of parents, the opinions of players, the opinions of trainers, and their viewpoints in the issue is what needs to be talked about so that it's part of everyday conversation and people are more willing to find the help they need or step away from sport if that is in their best interest.
Well, I've had concussions. I don't remember having the post symptoms. And I had a concussion playing in university. I was out next shift. Like, it was very different. And thankfully they've improved on that. Ironically, my son starts hockey tonight. Like, he's 5 years old. And there's a small part of me having, played a little bit of hockey in university and growing up playing it my whole life. There's a small part of me that maybe hopes he doesn't get involved in it because I know how it can get dangerous, but that's a silly sort of approach to it. My kids are into golf and hockey, and golf's much safer.
I was doing a speech in an optometry class at the University of Waterloo last week, and one of the students asked me after I gave my presentation and opened up questions, they said, well, so are you, when you have kids, or if you do, are you going to allow them to play hockey? And on the spot, right, it was kind of crazy, but I don't think you're wrong for thinking that because I think it's a function of the education we have now.
I took him to a skate once last year in April. And as you know, and your parents would know, the parents are the problem. And what happens is my kid's out there, and I went on the ice too, just to help out. And these kids are just, there's no awareness. They're 6 years old. Some of them are really, really good. My son wasn't. and they just have no problem to put their stick up by their chest and cross-check a kid into the boards. Like, and then the coach or the parent, you'll just say, hey, we don't do that. But by then it's too late. It's the awareness that's missing. There's no, I got to be careful. I think that starts at a young age with the parents, not the coaches, because the parents, because there's some crazy coaches that are, telling kids to do that. So I guess that's my fear. I'm just thinking, man, I've done dirty hits. Like I was never drilled in my head growing up, and I'm 25 years older than you, but it was never drilled in my head. You don't hit from behind. It was never, it was just, and it could easily happen. And a lot of times in the game now, guys are turning to the player and putting them in a position, which was not your situation. But, when I look at my concussion in university, man, like it was a suicide pass, and the guy just open ice, just put his stick up by my head, and just, that's how it was hit,
Right. See, the interesting thing of what you're saying that I take from that, and is a message I'm trying to get out there, is that, okay, so we have all these different types of hits. Some are dirtier than others, but at the end of the day, whether it's dirty or not, you have this issue of injury, and specifically we're talking about concussion. So exactly to what you initially started with, it's kind of the culture changer, the education that starts with the parents. To me, the missing piece of the conversation is that you might have to step away at some point.
Yeah.
Because we are putting this, it's risk reward. We as, and myself included, wanted to make a lot of money one day and be the guy one day. And there's a lot of risk to that, but it's never, ever a part of the conversation as a young kid that, hey, you get 2 concussions or whatever the rule ever becomes, you might have to stop playing, or a shoulder or a knee. That's never part of the conversation, other than it coming from my mother, who always said that. But it has to be from someone more than your mother as a young, egotistical 12-year-old, right?
A young, egotistical 12-year-old who also, it's ingrained in your mind that play in the OHL or Quebec Major or whatever, and you're really close. And that's the problem, because you're not really close. You're closer to making it to the millions, but you're not really close. And the problem I have with the whole system is that, and a lot of it, it's not the league saying that you're really close. It's this connotation from families. There's a draft. There's draft parties for kids in the 6th round of the OHL. The problem is you're closer, and sadly, you have to go through that route to get there. So it makes sense. But just because you're in the OHL, as you know, you're really not that close. It's still pretty rare, very rare, to come out of there and make a living. The difficult thing is you are a 17-year-old celebrity. I know now as a celebrity what's involved in that. And I'm 50 almost. You're a 17-year-old celebrity, not prepared to be a celebrity. The year before you were nothing. Now you're a celebrity. And a celebrity that makes no money, but thinks there's money coming. It's a horrible combination. You need really good parents and really good coaches and advisors, whatever, that remind you that you're probably not going to play in the NHL. And if you do, it's probably not going to be for long.
It's also falling back into the expectation of what people think you're able to do, which I'm uncomfortable with a little bit. Is that once you're done playing sport, and you may agree or disagree with this, is, yeah, it's a great career, but in a sense too, there's more to life than just revolving around sport, which I think was the initial issue that we talked about, is that you don't know anything other than the game, and you're, playing through injury, etc. And when I think that's another point that has to be spread, is that you can do something other than staying in the game. Yes, it may be an easier pivot, but I know a lot of guys that got into, and maybe it's at a younger age, got into other things beyond the realm of sport.
Oh, and that's what's important. And that's probably, you were that guy, but you have to, I think, a lot of guys play in the NHL, and then the next move logically is coaching, because it's all you know, as you said. Well, you're probably coaching in the minors, and a lot of those guys aren't into that, because you're back on 12-hour bus rides.
Yeah.
And you got 3 kids you've probably never seen much. So I don't know. I think a lot of guys, money's not the problem. It's being motivated, and what's your ambition now? You set an ambition as a kid, you achieve one of the greatest things ever, and you're that type of personality, where, okay, what's my challenge now? Like for me, I loved coaching hockey, and there's days when I'm like, okay, what's the new motivation? Obviously I want to get another show, but there's days where I'm like, maybe I'll pursue coaching. And it's like a weird transition, but I was really into coaching. I was 27 coaching tier 2, and I was going on that path. And then I veered, obviously for good reason, but it's just about challenging yourself. What do you want to challenge yourself with? Like, I miss coaching. I miss coaching minor hockey. I miss, and there's part of me that does hope my son gets into hockey, because I did love, coaching.
And so in between your show right now and when the stand-up starts, what is it for you personally that goes through your mind that gives you that kind of value or those challenges beyond coaching, beyond, like, where do you let your mind go, I guess, in between those segments when you're looking for a challenge and you're looking for something to stimulate you?
Well, right now I'm looking for new ideas, right? I mean, I'm very involved in my kids' life. They're very active in sports. I'm everything I do intense, right? I don't do anything half-ass. I have one speed, and that's go for the try to become the best. And it hasn't always worked out that way, but sometimes I've gotten close, and that's now what I do with my kids. I'm trying to teach them the value of being on a team sport, or being and the fun of it, and being an individual sport, and the mental toughness, and trying to become the best. I was joking with a friend of mine yesterday, like kind of joking, because my older daughter is 11, and she's a pretty high level golfer, but she's not the best. And I'm not that insane dad that makes her hit balls all day. And so, but at the same time, I don't believe you go into something and there's this big concept. It's just for fun. No, I said, and I was joking with my friend, I said, it's not for fun. It's to make it as far as you can. And I think the logic behind that for me is, like, why would you do something just for fun all the time? It should be some stuff for fun, but something you've got to, if you watch Steve Nash's Hall of Fame induction speech, he said, find something you love and become obsessed with it, and do it every day. And I agree with that. Like, get really good at something. Try to get really good at something. I don't care if it's a sport or if it's accounting, but try to get really good at something. Don't dabble in it. And that's what's going to make you excel at something. It might not be the first 10 things you try, but you're going to get good at something. So just being average at a bunch of things, to me, I don't know. I don't know where that's going to get you financially. I don't know where that's going to get you as far as mental challenges. And that's just me, right? I like challenges. Most of my life has been failures, way more failures than success. It's funny because you're a hockey guy. I'm still really good friends with my buddy at St. FX. And when I went to St. FX, so I played house league hockey. I played select. Then I went from select. I stopped probably 12, 13. Then I went to my high school. I played junior high school hockey. Never, ever played senior. Never made the team. Then I went to York University, played intramurals. And I was always a small kid. When I got to York University and played intramurals, it was full contact. It was a lot of junior B, junior C guys. And by my fourth year at York, I was like tearing up the intramural league. Okay? So I go to St. FX and I say to myself, I think I could play university hockey. Right? To myself. My brother went to Western Michigan on a scholarship, really good hockey player. So I tell him I'm going to try out for the varsity team, and he laughs, rightly so. But I trained every day in that summer. I rollerbladed. I lived in Halifax. I rollerbladed 2-3 hours a day, literally. Everywhere I went, I just rollerbladed. I had no car. I went to the gym for 2 hours. I just worked out. I had no trainer. I didn't know what I was doing. I just bench press. But I was in such good. So anyway, I walk on. I make the varsity team, and I remember standing in the opening. I was on the ice for the anthem, and I'm standing there at the center ice. My centerman's played for the London Knights. The left winger played tier 2 out there. I got guys on the team that were at pro camps. And I'm standing there going, I cannot believe I am here. And it was my buddy, I laughed with my buddy. I go, that was one of my greatest achievements, was setting this idea. And the only reason I made it, because no one knew who I was. And when, you go to these camps and you're coaching now, well, you can't. Guys in the dressing room were like, where'd you play? And there was a lot of Quebec major guys. Because I was from Ontario, they couldn't track anything.
Ah.
So I was like, yeah, I played a bit. I went to one junior B tryout. So I went to a couple junior B camps. Like I was embarrassed to say, I played York intramurals.
Right.
And it would have just traveled around the room and it would have been done. So and then I was just in good shape, and no one got in shape back then. So my first game, I'm so nervous. We're playing UPI, and I get 4 points. I score the game winner with 2 minutes left. I'm player of the game. I'm like, this is unbelievable. Like this is a story to me that's way more crazy than anything I've done in stand-up. And then, everyone catches up, and I was fourth line in about 7 games. But it's a big joke now with my buddies, because they're like, yeah, we thought you were like going to get 100 points or something. So to me, everybody, like, that's an example for me of just, I set my mind to something that everyone told me, are you nuts? You can't go from high school or intramural hockey to university hockey. And it was the same in my stand-up career. I was 30 years old when I stepped on stage for the first time. Come on, man, you're 30. Like, no one starts stand-up at 30. And I realize in anything you do, most people are they just love to be the negative. They just love to be like, and they mosey through life. But I just ignored it all and thought, okay, well, I'll find out for myself. I'm not gonna walk away from something because you said, and I tell my daughters and my son this, like, there's always one person. And I say, well, be the one person. There's only one guy that's ever started stand up at 30, or there's only one guy. Well, then let's be the guy. And that's always been my approach to it.
At that point, when you're starting stand up, what were you teaching as well at that point? Like when you left St. FX?
Yeah, so I left St. FX, got a job at my alma mater in De La Salle, and I was teaching, and I was my 5th year teaching. I went and tried stand up.
And you just tried it at like a pub or a bar, or did you?
Yuck Yuck's amateur night, and I changed my name because my real name's Gerry Donahue, and I changed my name because I'm like, I don't want anyone to know I'm doing this.
So that's how Gerry Dee came to be then.
So I had to make up a name.
Right.
So I'm like, I can't be Gerry D period, because that's gonna look stupid. So I just made it a name. And
your preparation for that first show, was it thought out? Are you happy with what you did? Or
no, it was I was working at the Keg, and there was another waiter there who was dabbling in amateur stand up, and I always knew I was kind of the funny guy around my group and stuff, and I always wanted to try it. I went to a couple stand up nights a couple years earlier, and I wasn't that impressed with what I saw. Anyway, so it was nice to have a guy at the restaurant doing it and telling me no, you sign up, you phone this number, you do this. He goes, just phone, man. You get phone Monday, and it'll take about 8 weeks to get up. So I had been writing notes down in this time. I said, all right. So I phoned Monday, and I got up that night. So I wasn't ready, and I bombed many, many, many times. And it's a weird job because nobody does well their first time. Some guys do okay. Some girls do okay, but most... Yeah, I bombed. Like, I don't even know if I was sweating. It was 5 minutes. It felt like 50. And then that's the athlete in me. That's the competitiveness in me that said, I didn't quit. I'm like, okay, I just failed. I'm not leaving it like this. Like, like you have a bad game in a sport, and a lot of people that are driven will go, they'll be the last guy off the ice next practice. Well, that was my mentality. I'm like, I can't, because people say, why did you go back? I'm like, because I hated that feeling of being last or being cut or failing or having a bad game. And I had done all those things in one night.
So in that though, there's something else to me that stands out. Like you, especially from the culture of hockey, I don't know many individuals willing to go in front of people like that and put themselves in a really, really vulnerable position, because that's not what we do as athletes. I don't really think we like to, there's a difference between putting yourself out there in the game and then socially in front of people. And why do you think it was that you had no problem with doing that? Because that's a big challenge today, is putting yourself out there and creating your own content that you're putting out there.
Well, creating the content, when I started stand-up, you have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Now, I'm not going to lie. Like, I liked when I would tell a story at whether I was at a pub or at a campfire or in a dressing room. I loved having the attention of everybody and seeing them laugh. I can't explain why. I don't know if it's innate. I don't know. My daughters have it. They love, they're on the show, and most people, I was the kid that did presentations all through grade school, high school, university, and I just never got paranoid of doing them. Until I was a teacher did I realize the anxiety that people feel speaking. I just never had it. I guess maybe it's just something you're born with. I actually thrived on it. I was like, oh, good, more people. I'll even be better. Oh, that's it. There's only 500. Damn, I wish there was 5,000 listening to me. So I don't know where that comes from. I've always remembered being that guy, and I can't relate. Like, my wife's the opposite, so I can't relate when you have to stand in front of a group of people and you are like sweating the night before, dreading it. I've never had that feeling. I've only had it once when I was, so look how confident I was, and it still was hard for me to do stand-up. That's how hard stand-up is. No, never teaching. The first day I wasn't one bit nervous. Like, I just, it's like, it'd be like saying to you, were you nervous, going on the ice every game? And I don't know if it was nervous as much as excited, but were you nervous, like couldn't sleep the night before? I don't imagine you would have been. I imagine you were so used to it.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
I don't imagine you like going up to the coach going, Coach, I can't. There's a big crowd out there, man. I don't know if I could. There's a lot of people. I don't know if I can play tonight. Like, no, you didn't. And it was no different for me. But there's something about public speaking that people say is the greatest fear in life. So I can't relate to it.
Right.
I can't relate to it because I've been in, I thrive on it. And I think every comic thrives on it. And that's why we're comics.
That's so cool. I like that.
But there's a lot of comics that are nervous before they go out. And I'm like, really? Nervous about it. Now, I'm nervous for TV stuff. When I started, I would do a couple late night things. That's different because you know that you can't forget stuff. Like when I was on Last Comic Standing, I was nervous. But again, I drew on sports to channel that nervous energy into, like I remember Gretzky saying, he was afraid of failing, and I kind of get what he meant. I was afraid of failing. So I would get myself so wired, like when I was on Last Comic Standing, to say, you cannot have a bad moment here. You cannot bomb. And I would put a lot of pressure on myself, and then I would deliver. I wasn't that way in sports, though. I was a high-level golfer, but never the best. I was a decent little hockey player, but never good enough to play at a higher level younger. So, but for some reason, stand-up, I found it, and I became, but there's times I didn't succeed, many times. Like I said, most of my life is failing. And a lot of people find that hard to believe, but that's the truth. Most of my life is hearing no and failing, and then going back to the drawing board and keep going.
Okay. So before you got to those points of failing, when was the first moment you realized? So you're still teaching and you're doing your stand up. And the one thing I find incredible is like I don't know how many people know this background story of you, which I think is so cool. Like I see you as you used to see the successful side, and at one point you were teaching, working at the keg, and throwing yourself out there on a stage, doing something that's putting yourself completely out there. Like I just think it's incredible. So at what point on that journey there, at that time in your life, did you think this is something I could do? Just like the first thought of this is something I could do for full-time work, maybe.
Yeah, it was a specific date. It was I went. There was a comedy competition in San Francisco, and I don't know how I found it, but it was pretty reputable. Robin Williams did it, Dana Carvey, Ellen, Louis C.K., Dane Cook. Everyone has done it, and it was just this big comedy competition that I don't know. I sent my tape in, and you had to get accepted to go in the competition. They took 30 people, 30 unknown people, like no big names were doing it. They were doing it before they were a big name. So I got accepted, and I had to walk into my principal's office, and I said, look, I was already doing stand-up 3-4 years. I said, I got accepted to this big comedy competition. I'd like to go. I don't expect you to pay me while I'm gone, but it's an opportunity. And he's a great guy, and I'm still friends with him. And he said, that's fine. I said, look, I'll probably be back in a week. And if I'm not. So at the end of the first week, the top 10 advanced or something. And I called him and said, look, I advanced. I'm going to be another week. And then I was another week. And then I won it. And when I won it, I was the first Canadian in, I think it was 23 years that had ever won it. And when I won it, the other comics couldn't believe I still had a job. They're like, you got to get out of your job. Like this, you got to get to LA. You got to do all that. And that's the day that I said, yeah, I got something here. No, I just told the principal I'm going to take a year off and see how this goes. And I never went back.
That is unbelievable. Was it the process? Like, was it an easy decision at that point? Or did you think?
Yeah, easy. I was already making $60,000 a year doing stand-up in my 5th year because I was doing corporates. I was a clean comic. You didn't have a lot of clean comics on the roster. So I was doing golf tournaments for $600 or $500. And I was doing, I was not $60,000, maybe $40,000. And I thought, all right, I was making $40,000 teaching, $40,000. I had a hockey school that I owned. I was running a hockey school, doing very well. And I thought there was no financial risk. I was going to lose half my income, but I knew that I was making $40,000 doing stand-up half time. I just knew it was an easy decision. I was never worried for 1 second that this wouldn't work out at that point. And if it didn't, I could go back to teaching. But I knew I was never going back. I
know so many people that struggle with that decision. Maybe the opportunity on the other side of teaching isn't the same for those people, but I really appreciate that path, I guess, you took, because it's pretty neat that you were doing. I mean, it takes a lot of your time, though. I feel like you were working almost all day, every day, with no time for, and that's almost what it takes. Like my buddy and I chat about how, yes, mental health is a huge issue today. There's almost and I could be wrong, and I'm sure a lot of people will disagree with me on this, but if you want something so bad and you have to you almost have to risk your mental comfort or composure for a little bit as paying it forward kind of thing. And I don't know if I'm right or wrong about that, but I feel like you have to get to a point where you're doing 3 or 4 things at once. And then you get to that point where things finally pay off.
For me, I always I didn't realize later in life till I'm probably OCD. I definitely ADD. And I just think having those things allowed me to not want to sit still. I would go to work. I would teach all day. I'd coach the high school hockey team. I'd get home. I'd drive anywhere up to 4 hours to do, when I started, I would do $50 gig in Windsor that night, drive home. I was still working at the keg, and it's all I knew. And my parents didn't have money. And I think that helped, because I knew when I was a kid, if I wanted to, some of the things that my friends were doing, like going on planes and, eating out at restaurants, little things that I take for granted, I had to go do something different. And it was what motivated me. And teaching was different. Teaching was, I would have been fine as a teacher my whole life. I have no problem with it. I was enjoying it. People think I laughed. I loved it. But there was something about it that I wanted, I wanted something more than that. And it was like, I gotta go through this life and challenge myself a little more than just, the status quo of a $40,000 job. There's gotta be more I can do. What are my talents? What can I do? And I remember sitting with a girlfriend in probably 1995, 5 years before I even thought of stand up. And I said to her, I think I'm going to do something like completely different. I think I'm going to make it in something. She's like, what are you talking about? I go, I don't know. And I said, I don't know. I just think I'm going to make it in something else. She didn't know what the hell I was talking about. I just always saw that I was going to make it in something, and something unique, something different. And I remember a friend of mine played in the major leagues, and he had my best friend from high school. I still talk to him. And when I was going through this stand-up journey, I said, how did you know you were going to make it? He goes, because I just wasn't going to not make it. And I kind of get what he means. Like, if you just don't stop at something and you say, I want to be, whatever, you'll either get really, really, really close or you'll get there. And the really, really close isn't as good as getting there, but you got to get really, really close before you get there. And, that's what it's about for me, is like, get good at sports, get as good as you can. It sounds crazy, but I think everything you should do, you should try to become the best in the world at. Everything you do, you should try to become from the second you're 6 years old and you start the piano, I think you should be doing it to try to be the best in the world. You probably won't, but what you'll get along that path will be really beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people are like, you just want your kids to, I want my kids to become the best in the world at something. They probably won't, but that journey is what's going to make them successful.
The thing I appreciate about everything you're saying is it has nothing to do with money, which I find so inspiring in where we are in society today with social media and having to have the nicest pants and car and etc. It's just this passion that's oozing out of you about.
Well, the money will come. I'm not an idiot. It's like I would never say do it and do it for free, but no, it's not. It's the process is get really good. The other stuff will fall into place. The process is not do it to make money. So you're right, but it is going to lead to money. And I'm not going to lie, money changes. I've been on both sides of the coin where I've had no money. My parents had no money. I had no money. I graduated from university with no money, like all debt, working 3 jobs. And I think that's why I was so motivated, was I just didn't want debt. Like, no one likes debt. Debt causes problems. My parents, debt was a problem. Like, they stayed married for 55 years, but anytime I remember them arguing, it was because they had no food that week, or my mom couldn't buy a dress, or my dad didn't have gas. I hated growing up hearing that.
Right.
And money is important.
So now you're doing comedy full time. You leave the teaching gig, and it now comes to creating and continuing to create high quality content. What is, and again, I ask this because not only for people that are creating stuff online, just for everyone today trying to create something different or create something people like, whether it's a speech when you're coaching, whether it's teaching in class to have the students really buy into what you're teaching, so on and so forth. What is your key to creating such valuable stuff that different people with different interests take a liking to?
Well, again, I think that's also something you have or you don't. I don't know. I never took a course on how to create. I mean, I just, even when I ran my hockey school, I took over this fairly successful hockey school in the GTA. And what year were you born?
93.
Yeah. So, I'm like, what can I do different? So I was coaching tier 2. I was on the bench. I wasn't the head coach. And I was watching these, we had Michigan State at our games and all the NCAA scouts. And I'm watching these kids. I'm like, Michigan State's looking at this player right now, and he can't take a backhand pass. And I just realized that the AAA hockey league was just so focused on recruiting and winning and moving the kid to the next level. The games were 10-1. You don't get anything out of a 10-1 game. And I thought we need more skill development in the elite players. So again, being creative, I just thought, how do I do this? So I went to Pepsi. I knew the president at the time. I taught his kids. I presented this idea to go invite the best 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-olds to a 2-week camp in the summer where they all train with each other. And they pay, and I can go to these families and go, it's free. And this thing took off. So I had Skinner and Tavares and Stamkos and Subban and Connor Brown and Hyman. They were all at this camp. Some of them came for 1 year, some of them came for 5. But there's one night I was looking in the NHL, there was 15 guys on the ice that night that had gone to this camp.
Wow.
So that was just an idea. I'm like, how do I make this bigger? What's missing? And I don't have a magic formula for it. But I like to create. I have creative mind. I think of even when I did commercials, I would say to the writers of the commercial or the director on the day, I'm like, it'd be really funny here is if this happened. And usually that's where the commercial would go. It's just something I'm lucky to have. I don't know where it comes from.
I guess in creating stuff that you're working on now today, I guess a question I would have is how closely linked is the content in Mr. D to your real experiences with teaching? What would be the percentage of accuracy on stuff like that, if you can say?
Question, but it's not really something that's easy to answer because there's comedy comes from exaggeration, and the exaggeration has to still feel like truth, and that's what I think we do a good job on the show. Yes, there's the first 3 seasons. There's a lot of things I did that we saw on the show, but then we exaggerated it. The show is really more about pointing out what teachers want to do and we can't, and we do it. And that's really what the show is. It's like, teachers have this weird position where we have to pretend we like everybody, and you don't. I couldn't stand some kids. So why not do an episode where you show that instead of pretending it's this perfect world? So there's not a percent really. Like there's a lot of moments where I thought about doing some of the things that you see on Mr. D, but I never did them. But there's some episodes in every season that actually happened. Like there's like, I fought one of my colleagues for charity. That's an episode. But we didn't fight to see who could be called Mr. D. Like it was just, we changed things.
Is there a truth to the one scene that I've actually sent around to probably 10 or 15 people is when you're sitting at the chalkboard and asking the students for a word and not the most polite words come out? Was that a real experience, or was that more created on your part?
That was that's a real viral scene. That scene went around the world.
Yeah.
That is one of the writers had a friend, and they were doing I forget what they're called, those words, but my kids do it now. Like they'll come home and they have to write 10 words that end in on, or 10. They're learning, right?
Yeah.
And this teacher asked the little girl words that end in an, and they said fan, man, tan, ban, and this girl said lesbian. That was real.
Okay.
We added the other stuff.
Right.
And that's sometimes what happens. You'll have a writer will have a friend, or I'll have a friend, and then we'll tweak it to make it funnier.
I like that.
So that scene was really just about the word lesbian. And then one of the writers added, why don't we do on prostitution? So, and then why don't we do crack whore? And if you watch that clip, crack whore is not even, we don't even see the girl say it because we added it so late and we'd already shot that side. So that's how, so then me improvising, what is prostitution? That's all improvised because that only came to me like 10 minutes earlier.
That's so cool that it happens like that.
Sometimes. Well, that's where your comedic mind falls into place, because a lot of people think they're funny, but they're not. And I'm not always funny, but luckily between me and the writers or the producers, someone is right. Funny can't be taught. You can't teach funny. How many people want to go take a course on how to be funny? You either get funny, or you are funny, or you're not funny. It's one of the three. Nobody is like just taught funny. They're none of those. And then they're like, I'm going to go learn how to be funny. You're not. You're not. Well, it's just something people want to be funny, and funny is hard. Funny is hard. And most people that think they're funny aren't, sadly. Right. But there's a lot of funny people that aren't in comedy. That in dressing rooms, there's guys that are hilarious, and you just, then there's the guy that tries to be funny, and you're like, no, you're not funny.
That's very, very accurate.
It's just people love to make people laugh. Laughing is a wonderful thing. And I think that's what I realized later in life, that I make people laugh, and how rewarding that is. You get emails and messages that they're going through something really tough in life, but they always flip on our show or my stand-up and they laugh, and it helps their day. And that's something I never even thought of when I got into this.
Mm-hmm. And that's where, really, I've never heard it that way. That gift of being funny can actually, right? Like different people have different gifts to different things or different skills that they're born with. Like and they use those for a greater good. And that's,
and it's a hard gift you can't teach it.
Mm.
It's, I think stand-up's one of the hardest things ever. And making people laugh, because there's an expectation. Making people cry, wow, that's easy. My God, that's so easy. Making people laugh, very hard.
Is it because people expect it? They're waiting for it?
Yeah, well, most people go to a comedy show and like, all right, man, prove you're funny, And when I do a show, if there's 1,000 people in that theater, there's 100 that are the funniest guy at work or girl at work. There's 100 that in that 100 that they could do this. I could do this. So, it's like when you played hockey, right? You grow up and there's guys that make it and everyone's like, I was better than him. You probably weren't, but it happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I just tell them, try it, man. Sign up for an amateur night and go try it. If it's so easy, try it.
And on the flip side of teaching, because I also see you tweet stuff about, serious tweets about how things can actually improve in the school realm of things. And one is fitness, which we can get into. But I guess in a sense of teaching, what would your opinion be on the opportunity as a teacher? Because you were in it for 10 years from what I know online. And then also now you've made this show about it. So yes, we joke about it, but it's a big part of life for the people doing it, but also for the 20, 30 kids in the classroom. And I wondered your opinion or approach to the opportunity of being able to teach someone or teach a group.
Teachers spend more time with your kids than parents, really. Like, my daughter will have a teacher today for 8 hours. I've seen her for an hour, and I'll see her for 2 hours after school. And it's a very important job. And sadly, they're not all good. You know, and in the process to hire the education on getting a teacher is all book education in marks. There's no social assessment. There's no, is this person fit to be, you know, advising kids on life? I think that's anything, that's any job. The hiring's not perfect, but with teaching, it's so important because they have your pride and joy in their hands all day. So I can't tell you the number of people that don't know what to do in university, and they're like, well, maybe I'll be a teacher. It's kind of like this. Oh, why don't I just be a teacher? That's income, pension, holidays, and that's not good for the profession.
Yeah, the social side's an interesting one, like having that.
Well, I wasn't trained for the social side. I couldn't relate to the kid that couldn't do presentations and was shy and getting anxiety before a test. I couldn't relate to that kid. I wasn't made aware that those kids were out there. You know, yeah. So then you rely on your own instincts and your own upbringing, and that's not enough. You know, I all I knew was sports. That's all I knew. I knew competing, sports. I didn't know the kid that took piano all day and couldn't bounce a ball. I didn't know how to relate to that kid. And I should have been taught more that when we do phys ed, that kid's probably terrified, you know, instead of saying, get in there, come on, you got to try to get the ball. Like, I wasn't trained to deal with that. I was taught, like, you know, all the pedagogy of teaching, and I had learned nothing in teachers college, to be honest. I learned a couple things from profs in off the cuff conversations, but I didn't learn anything, and I probably didn't put in the effort to learn it. So it's probably my fault.
That's an interesting side of it. There's in one of the tweets you talked about fitness before class. I think you said, or before school starts.
Something. It's getting so bad.
Yeah.
The obesity in kids is getting so bad. Walk by a high school one day.
Yeah.
And, you know, guys like you and I that were playing sports and stuff, you know, it comes autonomously for us. You know, you just go to practice, you can eat whatever you want. But most kids, some parents can't afford sports or don't have that push. You go to high school cafeteria. I mean, the choices aren't good. It's so for some kids, the only exercise they will get would be that mandatory, you know, fitness. And they say they have it, daily activity, but it's garbage. Kids need to sweat. And I when I taught phys ed, I didn't care if they knew the rules of badminton. I just wanted an 80-minute class. I wanted them to leave the class sweating.
Yeah.
You know, and every kid, the kid that was 100 pounds overweight, I wanted them to sweat. But it shouldn't get to that. There's no kids, unless it's a genetic thing or something, there's no kid should come to high school, you know, 200 pounds overweight. It just shouldn't happen.
Right.
Something's gone wrong in the school system earlier.
It's not a part of the curriculum or an expectation.
The first thing to go is the gym. Oh, we have a speaker today. The gym phys ed classes are canceled. Oh, we have a bake sale. Phys ed classes are. That's what happens in grade schools. It's like, it's math, English, French. Great. Let's learn those too. But let's not undermine the importance of being able to run a mile. Because you know what? You can't. I don't care how smart you are if you're dead at 40 from a heart attack.
I love that.
What's the point of being smart? You can't run a mile and you're in grade 6. I had a girl in grade 5 once could not do a sit-up. She couldn't do a sit-up. She couldn't get up from the bottom, lying down. And then I got the kid beside her doing 50 sit-ups in a minute. And that's when I went, wow. Like, what you are in trouble.
Yeah. And it's not their own fault even at that age.
It's not. It's what, you know, it's not their own fault. But we live in a society where you have to be so careful what you say. you know. And my wife and I have this conversation all the time. Like, what do you say if your kid's getting overweight? Well, people say, well, you should say nothing, because then they might, go the other way. And, well, okay, so what, you're going to have a problem either way. So why not just be honest and talk to them about, and look, some people, it's a genetic thing, and I get it. But for some, it's strictly the kids that are strictly diet and lack of exercise, that is parents' faults.
And also, the school could play a role too, now that I think of it.
And then it goes to the school. So if the parents aren't doing it, then we get to the school where hopefully they can do it. Something, a walk, anything, something.
I like that a lot. I really actually appreciate that comment, that if you're not healthy, then what is the value of everything else you're doing in school? Like, that should be on the number one of the docket, right?
It should be. And it's the last. It's the thing they're cutting.
Now, a little bit of fun I wanted to have, because what it was like being Donnie in Trailer Park Boys. I remember that scene like it was yesterday. How fun was it?
Yeah, it was fun. I mean, that's a cult show.
Yeah.
Especially at that time. I can't believe how many people still stop me from one or two scenes. Great group, great time. They let me play on the day. We ad-libbed, JP, Rob, and I in that scene. It was so fun.
That's so cool. That seemed like you had a ton of fun doing that one.
Oh, it was great. They just let me be creative, which I appreciated.
Landeskog and I, when we went way back, used to watch Gerry Dee Sports Reporter every day. We'd sit in the computer room at our rink and watch every day and just laugh our heads off. Like, he is one of your biggest fans. I'm sure you've run into him over the years. But
no, I haven't. That's cool. I haven't. That was a lot of fun, and I'm trying to bring that back. I'm just trying to figure out where and when and how. But that was something that I'm going to start posting those old interviews. I have hundreds of them because your generation you'd have been 16, probably 15.
Yeah.
So that was fun. That was so fun to do, and I met so many great athletes that I run into, and some are starting to pass away, like the older ones, or Roy Halladay. When I interviewed Roy Halladay and he died, it was right. I posted that interview, and he was such a good guy to do it that day, and so I got to meet so many great people. But
yeah, if you get a chance to bring it back, holy,
it's
in the works.
I'm trying. I got to get someone to bite on it. I know it would do well. It's just trying to convince somebody.
And then the other thing, that this is the part that's been, it's a part of my life all the time. I have an Italian background, and your stand-up about, I think it was Mr. Ricci. Was that what you were?
Yeah.
Was that? I need to know if that is a true story, because you are so bang on everything. My dad used to water the driveway all the time.
The water the driveway was true. The other stuff, actually, a friend of mine, happened to him. He gave me that story. But I had neighbors across the street that were Italian. They weren't called Ricci. I changed the name. Yeah. And they used to, they all watered their driveways and the tomato plants, hockey sticks, rose tomato plants. But yeah, a guy had, I had friends that had Italian. So a lot of times when you start stand up, your buddies are all giving you like ideas and stuff. And that was two buddies that kind of helped me sort of sculpt that story.
Holy, is it accurate? The not remembering the names either is that is unbelievable. Like, every time you said a different point, I had to catch my breath. Like, it was that was one of my earlier bits that did well for me. Yeah, and then Fakaf, we do that.
That was another buddy that did that. Yeah.
Oh wow. Well, as much as I'm sure a bunch of other people, you've been like you said, that gift of being funny and that gift of comedy that you have has made a really positive impact on my life, and also you were there in support when you had no idea who I was when I was going through my injury. So I can't thank you enough for
that's nice. That's
for everything
nice
you've done.
And I appreciate that, but you don't need to thank me. It's been fun to watch your journey too, and I'm proud to see how you've turned something really, which really felt like the end. And, I always tell my kids everything happens for a reason. And that's probably something you are aware of too. You don't think of the good that's coming out of it, but I would say that happened for a reason, and you're turning that into something special. So good for you.
Cool.
Okay, buddy. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of another Heroic Minds podcast. If you want to check out Gerry Dee, where he's performing, there is a link attached to the description of this episode. There's also a link attached to the video that we were talking about where he's teaching in the classroom from Mr. D. That's a funny one that went viral, so if you want to check that one out or watch it for a second time, the link is there. As always, I encourage any and all feedback, constructive criticism, comments. Let's have a conversation. Send me an email. My email is also in the description of this episode. I'm Ben Finelli. This is the Heroic Minds podcast. We'll talk again soon. As always, I encourage any and all feedback, constructive criticism, comments. Let's have a conversation. Send me an email. My email is also in the description of this episode. I'm Ben Finelli. This is the Heroic Minds podcast. We'll talk again soon.